Don't you ever wish you were down there?
I'm down there all I need to be.
Yes, but it's just a job to you. I'm talking about going down there and having some fun. Maybe with someone special. No dating for the Batman. It might cut into your brooding time.
1. Dating within the team always leads to disaster. 2. You're a princess from a society of immortal warriors. I'm a rich kid with issues. Lots of issues. And 3. If my enemies knew I had someone special, they wouldn't rest until they'd gotten to me through her.
That's love, bitch.
Welcome, everybody, to the Pseudo Nerd Podcast. This is episode 6 for February 12th, 2016. I am your podcast host, Josh Kiser, and joining me today, Mr. Giggles, Josh Haddix.
I don't like that nickname, but how you guys doing?
Quit giggling.
And Kyle Hoagland.
I don't even get a nickname.
I want to go on the record. I want to go on the record.
For the second time in a row.
I was going to say, he goes on the record a lot now.
I do not like Cam Newton, or I'm not a fan of Cam Newton.
Not a fan of Cam Newton.
And I don't like the nickname Mr. Giggles.
How about Mr. Gigglesworth?
I mean,
kind of aims towards the same idea.
So. Yeah. What are you gonna do, right?
Right.
Maybe not giggle. This will be, if you don't giggle in this one, you'll be 1 out of 6.
That's true. No, really hurt.
You were muted last week, so
right. I unmuted you guys this time, so hopefully everyone heard you, Mr. Straight Laced over here.
Fucking professional.
And we have a lot of professional media that you guys can find us on now. We're on iTunes, so don't forget to subscribe there. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Pseudo Nerd Pod on most of those locations. I think that's about it for the time being. Any other media I'm forgetting right now?
You say Facebook?
I did, yeah. Like us on there.
I wasn't listening.
We post some stuff. I'm glad you're not listening. So literally one of the guys recording the podcast with me is not listening to the podcast. How do we expect our listeners to listen to the podcast?
That's
using
a good
my
question.
ears, hopefully. Oh,
nice.
No, we're only allowed to have one shitty comedian on this show, and I think Kiser's.
I believe that's me. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So what'd you guys think of the Super Bowl now that it's over?
It feels good to know that I was correct about who's going to win. Right, Haddix?
I mean, hey, Vernon Davis did tear it up, didn't he, Hougie?
Vernon Davis was the equivalent of Sting at the halftime show. Invisible.
Just no-showed. It's really a bummer. And then they had to call up Coldplay, fly over the pond to get over here. So, good job to Coldplay. Thanks a lot. And the Black Panthers for showing up.
So, I'm just ignoring that right now. What? Am I the only one? Like, I'm all for a good defensive battle. Like, I'm not one of those people that needs it to be a shootout. But defensive battle, I don't think this was just a defensive battle. I thought this was a boring fucking game. There was no lead changes. I thought, it was sloppy on offense. And it wasn't sloppy because of really good defense. It was sloppy because, the offense was pretty sloppy on both sides. I thought Peyton looked like shit. Ted Ginn was pretty much zero. And Tolbert was awful. Demaryius Thomas has been just garbage. I just thought it was a lot of garbage offensive play with a few defensive stars.
Well, I mean, it was one of the greatest single player defensive performances I've ever remembered seeing in a Super Bowl. So you at least got to give Von Miller that. And to me, I love the Super Bowl. To me, a Super Bowl is interesting if it's still worth watching all the way to the end. The difference between a game like this that to some people might seem boring, which I say I love defense. I grew up, my dad being a defensive coordinator for football, so it was cool seeing a low scoring game. Yeah, there were some offensive. I think for Denver, their offense just in general is not that great to begin with, and Cam stunk it up, and I think that a lot of them were just kind of lost with being in the Super Bowl. But no, I enjoyed it because it made me still watch it all the way to the fourth quarter. It wasn't like Denver versus Seattle where you could have turned that off after the second quarter.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I didn't hate it like a lot of people did. I enjoyed watching the Broncos defense just get after Cam Newton. I mean, they were all over him. And I do agree that offensively it was a turd on both sides, whether it was because the opposing defense was that good or nerves or whatever it was. I enjoyed watching Cam Newton lose. And I do got to agree with Hougie to the sense that until C.J. Anderson scored that touchdown, it was a very close game. And
but I don't feel that way. I never felt like the Panthers had a chance at winning that game. The whole time I'm watching it. And even when it was a score, they're within one score, I never felt like the Panthers are going to do it. Like that's why you watch the Patriots-Broncos AFC Championship game, you always thought the Patriots had a shot of coming back and winning it, tying it, whatever. I never once felt that way watching that game.
The only thing the Panthers have going for them is they do have an explosive offense, and it would have taken one deep bomb to Ted Ginn to score a touchdown real quick, tie ball game. Now, they did look like the whole game. So.
I agree, but I just never saw that happening in this game.
You were going to. They're a momentum team. So after three quarters, I think that's basically what you're going to see from Carolina. So I do agree with Kiser on that aspect, but you still have to watch because anything can happen. It wasn't like it was out of reach. But I think if you, like we mentioned before, I think either Carolina was either going to put up 17 in the first quarter, or they were going to struggle, and it ended up being the latter.
It actually was a football game, not a ladder. So I don't know what you were watching.
He kept looking for Sting and Greg Norman. You got to give the guy a little slack.
Oh, wait, one more thing I want to ask before we move on. What the hell is up with Eli? You guys saw that before, like they scored a touchdown, and Eli just stares.
Did you guys see the Curb Your Enthusiasm video made to that?
No, I did not.
So, are you familiar with Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yes.
You know that song they play and they zoom up on Larry David whenever like something like crazy happens?
Yeah.
Dude, they loop that over Eli as they zoom up on Eli's like derpy face, and it is just perfect.
I did watch a clip of Peyton on the Jimmy Fallon show, and they asked him about that, and he said obviously, Eli was rooting for me to win, yada yada yada. But he said that the reason he looked like that is because he's thinking of it from a quarterback aspect. He's kind of thinking like, all right, don't get too excited yet. The game's not over. So he didn't want to get real excited.
I saw that too. And I saw Eli said the same thing. He's like, I was thinking like they need to go for two here to go up 2 scores.
Yeah.
And Eli, being a Giants fan, knows that like those last 2 minutes of the game, they'll blow it if it was the Giants defense. So it's understandable there. But I think that was still sort of like a bogus, like, even if you were like thinking like, oh, he needs to go for 2, you would like show some sort of emotion there, like a smile or like maybe a slow clap.
It was just unfortunate timing for Eli, is what it was.
Absolutely, it was. But that's brotherly love for you. And speaking of love, today's podcast.
I was wondering where you were going to go with that. I was thinking, what can you do with brotherly? But then you went with love. So
brotherly love, dude. Yeah, that's right. Today's podcast, in lieu of Valentine's Day, which is this weekend, we're doing a love-themed podcast. So, we're going to get on our emotional side and discuss some love stories in film, comics, and television, both on the nerd and the pseudo side of things, because that's what we do here at Pseudo Nerd Podcast. Is that a slow clap I'm getting back there?
That is a slow clap from Kyle Hoagland, ladies and gentlemen.
I halfway appreciate you throwing the pseudo nerd, just the monocle in there.
Thank you. That's what I do here. As the host, I have to remind people what they're listening to.
That's just good branding.
That's, the more we hammer that home, the more likely they are to subscribe on iTunes, give us a 5-star rating, leave us comments, and like our Facebook pages and Twitter at Pseudo Nerd Pod. So there it is again. Don't say we never told you.
I think we ruined your segue again, though. Yet again.
That's what we do here. We ruin segues. Hougie, why don't you start us off? We're talking love. and you wanted to take television, and you're taking the pseudo end of things. So why don't you just go ahead and roll into your television couple and the love story that you chose to talk about, whether it's your favorite or just go ahead and discuss everything about it.
Sure. So I decided to go with from How I Met Your Mother, Lily and Marshall. So Marshall Erickson and Lily.
By the way, everybody, real quick, if you've not seen How I Met Your Mother, Hoagie's going to spoil it for you.
Really? We're going to warn them about spoiling? All right. I respect that. So for those who've never seen it, so I'm going to spoil it anyways, like you said. So the story of their love happens in college. They meet in the dorm room at when they're in college, and they basically fall in love at first sight, and it's basically it never ends. They were together. They were 18 years old when they met. They were married, I think it was like 7 years later, and they just never looked back. It's one of the most beautiful stories, and one of the main reasons why is because in a television show, a lot of the staple relationships, especially married ones, you can go back to, Everybody Loves Raymond or Married with Children or King of Queens and stuff like that. Of course they love each other, but there's always like the nagging wife and like the idiot husband, like, whatever those stereotypes were. And the one thing that was always nice about these guys was that they were legitimately cute and funny, and they never played that. They were always crazy for each other. They just fit perfectly. It was almost like they molded themselves into one being, which made for some creepy television every once in a while.
Were they too boring in that aspect? I mean, is there a certain point? It's I guess boring's not the right word, but is it too ideal?
Well, they did split up for a little while,
right? Early on.
Yeah, but that might as well could have been forgotten, because it actually made them stronger when they got back together, because they were a mess without each other. They admitted to that when they did.
Well, yeah. I mean, they did eventually get back together. Yeah,
it wasn't like a bad breakup where they didn't care about each other. It was more like, she wanted to go to San Francisco to do art. To go to that art.
She followed the same dream you did.
That's right. San Francisco only brings sadness.
Well, Marshall was torn up the whole time. Well, and so was she. They were both torn up the whole time.
Yeah, but Marshall was eventually going to start dating, and then Barney kept taking one for the team.
Yeah, he's an ass. So, but they, another thing I liked about them too is that when you surround yourself around these other characters, so you've got Ted, you've got Robin, you've got Barney, and all three of them are just having just miserable, however you want to see it, I guess, miserable luck with relationships. Either you have Barney, who really didn't give a shit about having a relationship at all, but still he's a, borderline antisocial, psychotic guy in a sense. And then, obviously Ted's the classic hopeless romantic. And then Robin doesn't know what she wants, but she, is basing her whole life around her career. So doesn't have time for, something real. It was nice to know that you had like this constant, reliable,
that stable relationship.
Yeah, we all have friends, and I'm not going to mention names, but you know exactly who I'm talking about. That we have a Marshall and Lily that they broke up when we were younger, and all of us questioned love for a little while, and that's how I kind of saw it when I was watching when I started watching How I Met Your Mother. It reminded me of that couple that. It just didn't make sense. There was no one else that was meant for each other. It didn't make sense for Marshall to get.
Dude, it's been a long time. Sandra and I are not going to get back together. All right.
Hoagie, stop holding on to that, dude. All right. Kiser and Sandra, she's married. Okay.
She's actually married now. So
does she have a kid now?
I don't know, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, true. If Sandra ever listens to this, hey. So it's also they're best friends, and that's obvious. And the most important thing I think I wanted to really get out of this was that I thought was really cool about being in this relationship and watching them was that they actually had separate relationships with all of their close friends. They the five of them were, best friends. But Marshall had his thing with Ted. He had a personal relationship with Barney, and had a personal relationship with Robin. Even though that one was a little, maybe it seemed a little forced, almost like they had to. But it's still
I mean, don't. I might be wrong with this. It's been a while since I've watched the show, but don't they have a moment where they the two of them hang out and it's awkward?
They had an episode where they brought that up. They're like, we never hang out together, so they decided to hang out, and it was just weird the whole time.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Well, they had that. They had two episodes where he or she kept on seeing somebody's or he kept on seeing some other girl, and so that the only way that he was able to calm down or not have those thoughts was to bring Robin around, because Robin didn't turn him on at all, and that's kind of how Robin was. And they had that other thing where they went to that Michigan or that Minnesota bar.
Yeah. And
they had that cool little moment there.
Yeah.
So to me, I'll listen to you guys argue this, or if you guys even want to argue about how legitimate or how good that relationship really was. But when you got a guy who was, that New Year's that I think season 1, where Lily is just yelling Marshall's name and in New York, that's not going to work. You have no idea where Marshall is, but actually it did work, and Marshall found Lily that way. And then the other one, which is my favorite moment of theirs, is and I draw a blank.
It's when they renewed their realistic vows.
No, not even the vows one. Oh no, it was when they were at the airport and he plays with he has the marching band play him in. That was awesome. Who does that? No one does that except for those two.
Well, I mean, I won't argue with you. I actually agree that they have a great relationship. I mean, there obviously was some down moments, like when she went to Paris, but first off, that's realistic. And like you said, over I believe it was 9 seasons that show was on, wasn't it? 9 or
2
10?
seasons too long.
Yeah, but that's
a whole other argument. Yeah.
But I agree that over that period of time, they were the constant. They were, the strong relationship. To be honest with you, I think a lot of people can relate to Ted, the looking for the one, but really at the end of the day, after watching that whole show, you want what Lily and Marshall have,
Absolutely. It's a great point right there, because they have the best friend in each other, as Kyle said. They're goofy, they're silly, but they never are not in love with the other one. They can turn each other on. They're the only one for each other, and they know it. And it's the truest of love, probably on the entire show through all 9 seasons. Even given Ted's whole thing.
Yeah, I would agree. But I don't know what my favorite. Do you have a favorite Lily and Marshall moment, Kiser?
I just tried to think of it, and it's I sort of put that whole show in the back of my mind and forgot about it ever since the finale, and I need to go back and watch it again.
So jaded.
I kind of am. But I couldn't tell you off the top of my head a favorite moment right now. I mean,
but that's what makes them great, is that they have so many, and really it's not even about a moment. It's just how they act with each other. Each of them had different wants and needs in their lives. Separately, they had their own things they wanted to do. She wanted to do that art profession, and then he was going to be a judge, and he decided to hold off on that just to go to Europe with her for a year. He was willing to sacrifice a lot, and she's willing to sacrifice a lot just to make each other happy. And to me, that's the best part about it, is that there's not really going to be a defining moment with them, because they've been such a rock for 9 seasons.
Right, yeah, while you watch all the other shitstorm of relationships and breakups and makeups and hookups and all the other ups and downs. And meanwhile, they're just, they're keeping straight, they're keeping stable, and you can really appreciate that. And it was a good dynamic when compared to everything else on all the other characters on the show.
And it was
so
also based on,
worked.
I believe it was based on the one of the writers and his wife. I believe it was can't remember his first name, but the last name was Carter. They based a lot of these characters, or at least I know for a fact they based Lily on his wife, and so Marshall was Carter, I believe, and so that was also very interesting when they first were enlisting or trying to find people to play these roles. The wife even said, "Yeah, you have permission to kind of make me as a character, but only if you get Allison Hannigan to play as me." And they
It's
were
an interesting request.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think it's because she really liked Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like, it was like her favorite show, and she really liked Allison Hannigan.
I mean, who did?
That's a good show. So, I mean, it's fair enough.
I mean,
there.
it's no Angel, but I mean,
That is true. I'll give you that. I'm a bigger Angel fan.
I was going to say, you just piqued at Haddix's interest with that
I'm
one.
digging me some David Boreanaz, all right?
said just you.
I could try to tie David Boreanaz into Sam Raimi Spider-Man, but I'm struggling right now, so I'm gonna just do it.
If you found a way to do that, I would have given you so much props.
I was like trying to play like the six, what is it, the Kevin Bacon thing, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Yeah. But it's David Boreanaz. The dude was in Angel, Buffy, and the movie Valentine's Day. So
And Bones, all right? So,
Bones. So we do have that going for us.
I'll make sure when we do the tease, when we put this on the internet, that he gets mentioned in the tease. I feel like we've mentioned his name about 8 times. That's almost as much as we mentioned Porkins.
You just had to go there. Yeah.
I did. No one was going to mention Porkins.
That's true. Well, that's what you think. But I can't even tie Porkins into Spider-Man. This is just unbelievable. I feel like I failed everybody at this. But so my topic for love it's the Spider-Man movies. It's Peter Parker. It's Mary Jane. I wanted when we were discussing what we were going to do for this podcast, and we wanted to talk about our favorite relationships. I instantly thought of this one. And I watched the cartoons, I kind of read the comics for Spider-Man a little bit, and I always enjoyed the Peter Parker-Mary Jane relationship, the dynamic between the two of them, and specifically the Spider-Man movies, the first and the second. The third one was a piece of shit. We're not even going to talk about that, and for all intents and purposes, it is not part of my discussion whatsoever. And to be honest, when I was doing my research for this podcast, I went back, and it's been a while since I watched the third movie, and I went back and I read the wiki plot on it, and I'm like, this thing was so bad. Like, I don't know how this ever got greenlit to be a script. But anyways, I digress. We could spend a whole nother podcast talking all about that. The Spider-Man movie, first of all, between it, you can debate it or X-Men, but they pretty much jump-started the next generation of comic book movies that we see today. And the Spider-Man movie could actually be argued to be a love story disguised as a comic book movie. And I say that because the opening lines of Spider-Man 1 is Tobey Maguire, who plays Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, and he says, oh, by the way, spoiler alerts for Spider-Man movies, so just throwing that out there, guys.
Peter Parker is Spider-Man.
He says, who am I? You sure you want to know? The story of my life is not for the faint of heart. If somebody told you it was a happy tale, if somebody said I was just your average guy, not a care in the world, somebody lied. But let me assure you, this, like any other story worth telling, is all about a girl. That girl, the girl next door, Mary Jane Watson, the woman I loved since before I even liked girls. And then boom, it goes into Mary Jane with like her boyfriend who's Flash Thompson and not him. But so literally the opening dialogue is him basically saying this is his love story. And then they like make a comic book movie out of it. And
the chick flick beginning.
It could be. I mean, it's so the movie. The reason I like this dynamic is because it's it's that whole part of it's the cliched. He's the nerd. She's the popular pretty girl at school. Now, of course, it's also the little bit of the cliche, the popular pretty girl who has all these skeletons in her closet. Her dad's abusive. Life's not as grand as she makes it out to be, so she just dates the jerks and the jocks and that kind of thing. And she's the girl next door, literally living next door to him. And Peter Parker's the nerdy guy who doesn't think he has a chance with her, so, doesn't think she even knows his name. And then, of course, things happen, life happens, and he becomes Spider-Man. And she, as Mary Jane, falls in love with Spider-Man because he saves her. So there's a dynamic there where she falls in love with Spider-Man, but she can't be with him because he's Spider-Man. Like, it's that unattainable goal, much like his unattainable goal of her. And then she sort of has this thing for Peter Parker as time goes on. Like, he's the nice guy, but then she's tormenting herself with the Spider-Man dynamic. And really, here he is. He is both of those. He is the two things that she wants, but she doesn't realize it. And meanwhile, he wants her and doesn't think he can have her because he is now Spider-Man, and knows that his enemies would not let her live if they knew that, if they attacked her, they could get to him, kind of thing. And
that seems to be the very consistent thing with most superhero love, is that it's you have a persona that's like a human persona, and you have your superhero persona, and you have to kind of separate the two for the sake of someone you love, because you don't want to put them in danger. And also, before you continue, I did love how you mentioned, or you said that the way he became Spider-Man was, life happens. That's how he became.
Well, it's...
puberty, you stub your toe one day and you're Spider-Man.
And next thing you know, you're Spider-Man. Well, yeah. But if I were to ask you guys, so just specifically in these movies, or not in these movies, in movies in general, if I were to ask you to name in movies the top 5 most iconic kiss scenes in a movie, do you not think that the Spider-Man kiss scene where he's hanging upside down and Kirsten Dunst pulls the mask down just enough to reveal his lips and kisses him would not be in that list? Like, one of the first things you think about.
Did you say movies in general or comic book movies?
Movies in general.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty iconic. I mean,
I can think of like a few other ones that are there, but it's one of the first. Like, if I actually did that afterwards, I was like, I Googled like iconic kiss scenes, and it is like in every list.
Was Wild Things on there with
No, it was not, dude.
But for what it's worth, for all you OC fans out there, they even did that iconic kiss on the OC because I think his name is Seth. God, it's been a while. Was a nerd, and then she's the popular girl. Same type of situation.
Oh yeah, well, and actually that's another thing. It was parodied and redone a lot after that movie came out.
Yeah, I would have to say, and maybe it's just because you put me on the spot or put us on the spot, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of the ones that sticks out the most because of how it was done. They didn't just kiss.
Right, exactly. It wasn't just a normal kiss. There was something about it. It was.
I'll give you that.
The other ones that came up that I could think about was the Lady and the Tramp kiss, which is adorable with the spaghetti. There was a Gone with the Wind, which I'd never watched, so whatever. The Notebook, where they're in the rain and she...
If we had Twitter followers, you would have people yelling at you right now for never seeing Gone with the Wind. Not even a little bit of it.
No.
If we had Twitter followers, nice.
Shannon's mad at you.
The Notebook, yeah, you're right.
The Notebook, yeah, that was on there. And there's one or two others that... 16 Candles, that whole scene they're sitting on the table with the dining room table with the cake and stuff like that. Like, those are scenes that are like well known, but Spider-Man kiss is right there with it.
Dude,
I feel like we didn't have enough time to actually refute you on that. It's the only thing I can really think of if I go back to movies, like maybe when Jack and Rose, kiss on the Titanic.
That was another one. Yep, that was definitely another one. But right, yeah, like I said, if I had to ask you guys, hey, write a list of 5 iconic kiss scenes in the movies, this one would stick in your head.
Yeah, it would.
So, and that's not really, that doesn't prove any of my point. It's a very memorable scene. But the part...
Even if you Google iconic kiss scenes, like the fourth picture is that picture of...
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
them
right.
kissing. And then, man, R.I.P. Patrick Swayze. The very first one is him and Baby kissing.
I'm surprised you didn't say that, Hougie. I'm disappointed in you right now.
You want to know why? Because I didn't really think of it as like it's iconic. Like the kiss scene didn't seem iconic to me.
I'm still disappointed in you. So,
was there a good one in Havana Nights? Oh, maybe there was a good one in that Dirty Dancing.
Anyway.
All right. Anyways, we'll go back. So you go through this whole first movie, and by the end of the first movie, Mary Jane, she's, the Green Goblin almost had her killed, and she's sitting there and she's talking to Peter, and she tells him, she says, you know what, I was up there and I was about to die, and she's like, you know what I realized is the only person I wanted to be with was you, Peter. It wasn't Spider-Man, it wasn't Harry, it wasn't Flash Thompson, it wasn't any of those guys. Like, I wanted to be with you. And, Peter's been waiting his whole frickin' life to hear those words from her, and then he knows with great power comes great responsibility, and says he can't be with her, and pretty much just disses her right there and walks away. And it's like, it just kills you. You're like, you want them to be together so bad, and this moment happens, and it's like, no. And that's how the movie ends. So then, of course, you go into the second movie, and it's the same dynamic, except now she's dating Jameson's son, who's the astronaut, and she's like kind of friends with Peter still, but doesn't see him all the time. He keeps letting her down, and he's actually getting sicker as it goes on. So the whole second movie's love story, or the overall story, is Spider-Man is losing, or Peter Parker's losing his powers. And there's a quote early on from Dr. Doc Ock.
Octavius.
Dr. Octavius. And he says something basically along the lines of, can't keep something as complicated as love inside, it'll make you sick. And that basically is what's happening, is he's keeping his love for Mary Jane inside, and it makes him sick, and he loses his powers as it goes on, and it gets worse and worse. And it's not until he finally realizes Mary Jane's in trouble, he loves her, and he powers back into it. He gets it's all back, and that's when his he just goes and he goes to save her. And that scene at the end where basically Octavius is going to drown in the water and take the sun that he created down with him. Spider-Man's holding a whole wall up, and his mask is off. Mary Jane's there, and she looks over at him, and she sees Spider-Man. It is Peter Parker, basically, her two worlds collide. And that reaction that she gives, still, every time I watch that scene, gives me goosebumps. And it's like finally they're going to get together. So they get out, and first of all, the dude's holding this wall, right, from collapsing. You can tell he's using all of his strength. Like, it's about to come down on her. And she looks at him and she says, so, do you love me? And he's like, yeah, I do love you. She goes, even though you said you didn't? It's like, bitch, come on. This wall is really heavy, give the guy a break. Well, you can fight about this later, but that's such a typical woman thing, right? And
you're typical women, right?
I know, typical women. Coming from the guy who's over here single.
Says the guy who's waiting to get bitten by a spider himself.
Hey, I'm waiting for life to happen. One day I'll be Spider-Man. So you're thinking, okay, she knows he's Spider-Man. He's Peter Parker. He's the guy he loves. It makes sense. Now she knows why he can't be with her. He creates a web. They lay there together for a minute. And then he's like, I will always be Spider-Man, and as long as I'm Spider-Man, which I will always be, you and I can never be. And he lets her go down back to Jameson's son. And it's like, well, come on. I just sat through 2 movies of this. So she goes to the wedding, and then boom, walks out on the wedding, and she goes, sees Peter Parker at his doorway, and she's like, I can't be half alive, half of ourselves. it's love, and I've always been standing in your doorway. And then she says, my favorite line, isn't it about sometimes somebody saved your life, Peter? And then boom, they get together. And then Spider-Man 3 happens, and we forget everything about all that.
I thought you were going to say this, because this is my favorite line for some fucking reason. And this is what I thought you were going to say, is right at the end, when I think the sirens go off.
And she says, go get him, Tiger.
That's like my favorite line.
That's like right up there. It's such a good line. I have a thing for Kirsten Dunst, too, which might be part of it. And it's a weird thing for her, but I do.
I'll say I enjoyed, just like you, enjoyed the first two movies a lot. I was not a huge fan of who they casted for Spider-Man or Mary Jane, to be honest with you. I didn't hate it. I wasn't like pissed off, and all that kind of stuff, but I just wasn't a huge fan.
I liked it. I mean, I loved the casting in those movies through and through. And I was fine with it. Like, I don't know, I've always had this, I always thought Kirsten Dunst was cute, and I thought they worked well together in that movie.
They did. And they were still good movies. Like, it didn't like ruin the movie for me or anything. I just feel, I would have liked to see, as crappy as the Amazing Spider-Man, the two, well, the first one I didn't think was too bad. The second one wasn't that great. The newer ones, I liked who they casted in that movie, and I was curious to see who they were going to cast as Mary Jane.
Yeah, I always wanted to know that as well, too.
If they got to that point, but they never did, so we'll never know.
So, I mean, what do you guys feel about the Peter Parker Mary Jane dynamic? I mean, to me it was always, some of it's the cliched, superhero can't be with the normal girl, but what I loved about the movies is they finally she learns his secret after he hides it from her for so long, and he's able to finally get together, and it's sort of that, you get that satisfaction out of it that you don't always get from these tormented love stories in comics.
What would have made me feel better about it was, as a person who grew up, the only comics I ever really read when I was a kid was Spider-Man. To me, he's probably my least favorite movie superhero, but he's, as far as comic books, maybe Batman slightly more, but Spider-Man's always been my favorite comic book hero. And it would have made more sense, I think, if it was just so weird that they went right into the Mary Jane story and not because Gwen Stacy, it seemed like that was his initial first love. And then it became Mary Jane later. And,
well, yeah, and I mean the Gwen Stacy thing isn't. It's touched in the third Spider-Man, where they decide the third Spider-Man, they had like 75 ideas and they try to throw it all into one movie. But in the comics and how the Amazing Spider-Man was going to do it is, she was in many people's eyes his first love and the true love. But of course, she gets killed off in like every one of those. But I always enjoyed the Mary Jane. And then it makes
sense then that when he does start having feelings for Mary Jane, he knows he can't do that, because the last time that he had somebody figure out who his love interest was, she ended up dying because of it.
Absolutely, yep. That's a great point.
I get it, but in this story arc, in this movie, he gets his powers later, or it seems like
right. Well, he gets it at the same time, but there's just no Gwen.
Right. There's just Gwen's just kind of removed, and I think that was some of the. When the movies came out, that was some of the complaint about, where's Gwen Stacy? Like, there's a lot of people who are, shippers for Gwen Stacy. So,
well, I don't know. It didn't bother me that Gwen originally wasn't in these movies, because Gwen was more the comics. Like, I don't even think she was in the Amazing Spider-Man cartoons of the 90s, which I grew up on. So it was, for a lot of people, it's Peter Parker and Mary Jane. They were, at that point, probably too, in the comics, like married and things like that. So I could see why they focus on her. She was better known, but I understand if they knew that they could make like 6 Spider-Man movies, then I could understand doing the Gwen Stacy dynamic into the Mary Jane relationship. All right, well that's all you guys got there.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed it like you did. The first 2 movies we're talking about again.
Yeah, again, we don't even talk that third movie.
Yeah, so no, I did like it. I like their dynamic. So,
An interesting dynamic is going to be the relationship Haddix is about to talk about. And when we were discussing what we wanted to do, and we decided we're going to do television, movie, and comics, Haddix was the obvious choice for comics. He's reads a lot more than the comics than Hougie or I do. And his choice to me was a different one. I did not see this one coming. He chose Batman, which, I saw that coming pretty easily. But then his female counterpart for the romance, he chose as Wonder Woman. And Haddix, I'm just going to let you go ahead and explain why and kind of go into this unlikely duo.
And I am going to thoroughly enjoy this. So, this is going to be a real fucking nerdy, but I'm going to bring the nerd part to the Pseudo Nerd podcast. To throw some history in real quick, I don't want to get too in-depth with any of this because this is something we could cover if we do DC later. All the stuff I'm going to talk about happened, I guess, a while ago. A few years ago, DC did this thing called Flashpoint, which was this big event that kind of brought all their worlds together. And when they did that, they were basically able to rewrite a bunch of different stories. They did keep some, but it was kind of like a soft reboot. They rewrote some characters' origin stories, rewrote how some characters met other characters. And since that has happened, there really hasn't been much Batman and Wonder Woman. Before that, though, there was some. Not a lot, because a lot of people don't even know some of these things happened. But I'm going to tell you guys the few times it did happen and why I think it would have been a great story arc for someone to explore. So here we go. First one, which is probably more popular than all the others, is the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited cartoon. They did touch on kind of that little romance between Batman and Wonder Woman. It never was really anything big. It was more flirting than anything. The big storyline there was an episode where Cersei, who's like a witch in the Wonder Woman storylines, turned Wonder Woman into a pig. And the whole episode, Batman and Zatanna are running around trying to find a way to change her back. Eventually they find Cersei, and she makes it seem real dark. And she's telling Batman the only way that she'll change her back is if he does something that he would never do. And they make it seem real ominous and all that. Ends up being she wants him to sing this song in front of everybody because Batman's this real, kind of stoic character. So he sings in front of everybody. It actually became real popular, and they ended up having the guy, I can't remember who's the real famous Batman voice. Is it Kevin?
Oh yeah, Kevin Conroy.
Yeah. He ended up making like a whole version of it later just because it was so good. So that was a kind of like the big moment in the cartoons. But concentrating more on the comics, there was a few instances, and I'll save the big one for last. But the first time you see it, there's a storyline in the Justice League of America, the JLA comic run, where, and I won't get too much into the stories because those are, can be very in-depth, but I'll kind of just tie into where Batman and Wonder Woman fit in. They go back, the Justice League goes back in time to find Aquaman, and they end up getting in a fight to the death. And right before they die, Batman and Wonder Woman are the last two alive, and they share this kiss, which like surprised everybody. No one thought it was coming. They shared this kiss, and they end up dying, like holding each other's hands. Obviously, they ended up coming back to life and all that. Won't get into any of that. But a few issues later, they kind of put off what happened, and then a few issues later, they kind of return to it. The Martian Manhunter has this machine that lets you live out different scenarios in your life via like this dream state. And the whole issue of the comic goes back and forth between Wonder Woman fighting crime in Gotham City with Batman, and Batman growing old and dying, and Wonder Woman's still young, obviously, because she's immortal. So they decide not to be together. But it's a real cool issue. You kind of see these different futures that are possible. And then they kind of just leave it at that. They never really touch it again. The second time you kind of see something is the story arc called Trinity, where they they write this story about the first time Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman meet. And Batman ends up on Themyscira, which is where Wonder Woman's from, and he sees her bathing and becomes like overwhelmed with her beauty and like rushes to kiss her. Obviously, she doesn't like that. Like,
what a pervert, dude!
What kind of creep?
Yeah, it is.
Batman, a stoic guy. It's like
this guy creeping on a naked girl bathing, and then decides he's going to go kiss her.
The world's greatest detective.
I think that's like where they try to think it in there is like Batman would never do that, but he was so like taken by her beauty, if you will, that he kind of loses control and rushes to her, and she like knocks him out and all that.
It's coming from a playboy, like Bruce Wayne, the playboy, who probably can have any girl that he wants.
But that's how beautiful she is, you know what I mean? So, and the rest of the issue, they kind of don't really touch on it, but it kind of just shows a little bit, just a little bit of something there. But the big one, and this is my favorite one, and by far the biggest, kind of romance they ever shared. I don't know how familiar you guys are or anyone who's listening is with the Blackest Night story arc, where the Green Lanterns use a green power ring. Ends up
is that the Black Lantern one?
Yeah, the black Lanterns have the black power ring. So again, I don't want to go too much into those details, but in the Wonder Woman Blackest Night story arc, she gets possessed by a Black Lantern ring. And spoiler alert for anyone listening, this has all been retconned. So I mean, it doesn't exist anymore. But Batman died in the Blackest Night story arcs previous to this Wonder Woman incident. So then Wonder Woman gets possessed by a ring, kills a few people. She's about to kill her mom, and she gets hit in the head with a batarang, turns around as Batman. She starts fighting Batman, and she's like choking him. And he's, telling her like, this isn't you, you're possessed by the ring. And in the comic, there's kind of like the Wonder Woman who's attacking Batman, and there's like kind of her inner dialogue going on. And she's trying to fight herself. And then finally she says, Bruce, and kisses him. And it kind of breaks this hold she has over Bruce, or over the hold the ring has over her, because she finally realized that she loved Batman, and her love for him is what broke this spell. A lot more stuff happens after that, but we won't go into it. But that was kind of, in the comics, it was her realization of how much she actually loved Batman. So, unfortunately, all that 52 stuff happened after this, so they never touched on it. All that stuff.
That's what I was going to hit, was the 50,
all that stuff went
52.
away. Yeah, all that stuff went away. So since then, nothing has happened. But why I hope to God in the future someone does something with these two is because I think their dynamic is really, really good. You have two people who, while completely opposite of each other, you have this man who is very analytical, who's very, kind of based in reality, doesn't believe in magic, doesn't believe in gods. And then you have this woman over here who basically is a god and, has a magic lasso, things like that. So they have like such different points of views, but they love each other in certain arcs. They love each other. So it doesn't keep them apart. But at the same time, they're both warriors. Batman is the ultimate human warrior. He's a superhero without having any powers because he's...
I thought the Ultimate Warrior was the Ultimate Warrior.
Well, he's dead. So
Too soon.
Come on, bro. But he's, a superhero he's a human who has trained his body and mind so much that he's considered a superhero. And you have Wonder Woman, who nowadays is considered the god of war. We won't go into all that, but she's a warrior. I mean, she is the embodiment of a female warrior. So they're so different and so similar at the same time that I think it would make a good love story compared to different ones that they've been in, whether you like them or not. So that's what I would love. I would love for someone to finally just bite the bullet and write a real long story arc based on these two loving each other, just to see where it goes.
It just seems like it sounds awesome. Like I'd be a bigger fan of it. Obviously the default, just for the sake of you got two guys that I believe can be considered immortals in Superman and Wonder Woman. They'll be around after people like Lois and Batman are long gone, and Superman in the Red Sun, where he had a relationship with her. Then again, Wonder Woman also had a relationship with Aquaman for the same reason. It was like a political relationship where they almost all got killed.
Yeah, there's been different storylines that kind of throw things together, but for the most part, the Superman Lois Lane is normal. That happens in all storylines except for some. Wonder Woman does have Steve Trevor, different variations of it, which I hate that because it's basically Superman and Superman and Lois Lane just switching the genders of the two.
Great name, by the way. It's like such a generic name.
Steve Trevor.
Yeah. So
who thought Steve Trevor should be the guy who should be with the most powerful woman?
Well,
Steve.
We'll find out in the Wonder Woman movie coming out next year, I think. I don't know when that's coming out, but it's not a very touched upon romance, but it has been mentioned at times. And I would just be curious to see an in-depth storyline with those two instead of.
I just feel like the reason it shouldn't be able to work for the same reason that Lois and Clark shouldn't work.
Exactly.
It's a human with a god, and it all forms. It's one will age, the other won't. Physically, I mean, let's be honest, it's going to be very hard to, make things happen without her, breaking his body, if you will.
So, I mean, it's like you said, any cons are the same cons as Superman and Lois Lane. There's a lot of things that you don't know how it would happen, but I think it'd be an interesting dynamic. So.
Well, it's also an interesting dynamic because, like I said, Batman's been like the playboy, and really, Wonder Woman's always been kind of like the feminist, no single man could, deserves me type of thing. So it's because she's an Amazon, they're kind of like.
That's kind of how I am. No single woman deserves me. So it's a very similar dynamic.
Not because the spider hasn't bitten you yet or anything, but yeah. So that's what I always thought that was a weird thing about her. With anybody, it's just that she kind of grows up with the notion of that being the leader of the Amazons and being a god, is that there's no man that would be worthy of her anyways.
Well, she's technically, and again, especially with the new stuff happening, they kind of changed some things. But
I like how comic books do that, by the way. Just here's a new arc, kind of just. Everything else.
I know they did, and again, we can get into this if we do a comic book thing. But they did it to try to be. Marvel kind of did something similar too. They did it to try to kind of relate to a newer generation of people and kind of redo some storylines, make some characters more edgy than, like Superman was always goody two shoes. Now he kind of has a little bit of a dark side to him. So, it is what it is, but
Vader must have gotten to him.
Dude, come on, man. You're mixing up your. I
was actually hoping you were gonna, when you start talking about pros and cons, that you're gonna throw the whole.
Dude, I thought about it. I just let it be.
Star Trek, bro.
Well, let me ask you this, Haddix. So, you are the Batman fan, the biggest Batman fan of the three of us. There's no doubt about that. So, is Wonder Woman the one you would prefer him to be with? Because he's had other love interests, much more prevalent, I think, love interests in movies, comics, things like that, with other characters. Is there one that you prefer over these two?
I mean, I would like to see it, to be honest with you. I think I would like it the most. I also really like his relationship with Talia al Ghul, which he has a child with, and he becomes Batman, and all that kind of jazz. I enjoy that relationship. I think that's a cool dynamic. It's the daughter of one of his arch nemesis, if you will. The Catwoman one is the most popular. Catwoman, Selena Kyle, whatever.
I think that's just because Catwoman is the most popular of those characters.
And it's all right. I don't mind it. It's just, I don't know, it's almost too...
overdone?
Yeah, that or, would Batman... And I guess you could say the same thing for would Batman go for an Amazon goddess, but, would Batman really go for a cat burglar who likes stealing stuff all the time? I don't know. It's just a weird...
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I don't not like it. I don't hate it or anything like that, but... And maybe it's just because
Although, to be fair, I never thought Batman would watch women get naked and then try and kiss them. So, I guess anything's possible.
But he is a man, right? So
what about
that is in his name.
Vale? Wasn't Vicky Vale also a?
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. Batman's had a lot of, or Bruce Wayne has had a lot of love interest. Again, in the cartoons, in the animated series that we watched when we were a little, they kind of mentioned some things like that. Catwoman's the most prevalent one, but for the most part, Catwoman is kind of, especially now, Catwoman is kind of Batman's love interest. He did have a child with Talia al Ghul, but they have a complicated past. So.
On Facebook, it is complicated between the two of them.
It's complicated. I mean, they have a son together, so it's very complicated. So, but I think the Wonder Woman Batman one would be a very cool spin on things, and we'll see if anything ever comes of it.
Not to spoil anything, but I don't know if you've watched. Did you watch the newest trailer for Batman vs Superman?
Oh God, yeah, I did.
Did you see that there's a little bit of?
Well, and I've heard speculations that there might be something between them. I feel like it's gonna be like the cartoon, the Justice League cartoons, where there's kind of this little flirtation that happens, but nothing ever happens.
Right, and I don't think they're gonna do the Superman Wonder Woman thing at all because, Lois is in this, and I think they show like a scene of like Clark and Lois. So I don't even think they're going to touch base on the Superman Wonder Woman dynamic.
I've always hated that. It's the worst thing ever. There's actually a comic book. There's a comic book out right now that is Batman or Superman Wonder Woman, and it's kind of like their love interest, and I hate it. I don't read it, but I hate it.
He's going to go on the record and say he's not a fan of it.
I'm saying
he's not a fan of Cam Newton. He's not a fan of any story arc that involves a romance with Superman and Wonder Woman.
Hate it. Hate everything about it.
Well, all right. So I think that's going to wrap things up for us this week. We've kind of all talked a little bit. We got a little romance in there. Gave our little tidbits and feelings on why we appreciate certain dynamics, certain relationships in all things pseudo and all things nerd.
Thanks for the tidbits, by the way.
That's what, yeah. The tidbits were for you, Hoagland. This weekend, Deadpool comes out. I'm going to go see it. I recommend all you guys go see it. In a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about it, so you guys should probably go see the movie if you don't want it spoiled for you. But I just want to remind everybody about that, because that should be a good one. A good Valentine's Day movie to go take the ladies to go see.
A rom-com, if you will.
A what?
A romantic comedy.
Romantic comedy? Come on, dude. Come on, Hougie. God.
Oh, sorry, I've never referred to it as a rom-com. That shows my age, right?
Yeah, I don't know. All right. Well, don't forget, everybody, follow us on iTunes, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Google Hangouts, Spreaker. I don't know. There's probably a few other things under there. At Pseudo Nerd Pod or Pseudo Nerd Podcast in some of those formats. Tweet at us, like us, give us some feedback. Let us know what you're thinking about the show, what you want us to talk about, what you don't want us to talk about. All that good stuff. And next week, we're going to go back to the sports topic a little bit. We've got the NBA All-Star break coming in, and Hougie, you will be happy to hear Sting will be the halftime show for that.
I'm glad they were able to rebook him.
Yeah, he's a tough act.
We're actually just going to get a sound clip from last week about, I wonder what songs Sting is going to sing at the...
We're just going to insert that right in there to be flawless. So we're going to talk the NBA a little bit, specifically the Cavs probably because we are Clevelanders, but then also talk a little bit about the NBA season as a whole, since we're at that midway point. And do a little sports stuff on that end. So, for Kyle Hoagland, Josh Haddix, I am Josh Kiser. And from Hidden Valley to the Napa Valley, we'll see you guys next week.
Have a good Friday.
See you later.